Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you into rest. Before we begin, tap like and subscribe so you'll always have a bedtime story waiting. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to know. I was 19 when I started the overnight shift at the Walmart on the edge of town in Elridge, Kentucky. The kind of store that felt like two different places depending on the clock. Daytime was fluorescent chaos. After midnight, it settled into a slow, strange kind of hum. You'd think 3 a.m. overnight would be boring. It wasn't. The things I saw there could fill a book. This, though, isn't about me. Not really. It's about a guy we shouldn't have hired. His name was Travis. It began like any other night. The store smelled like the artificial lemon they pumped through the vents before closing, undercut with mop water and the faint, greasy ghost of burnt pizza from the deli. I clocked in, cinched the cheap back brace the company made us wear, and went to meet the night crew in the stockroom. That's where I first noticed him, standing off to the side with his arms crossed, staring at nothing in particular. He had a jagged buzz cut, the sort you get when someone uses dull clippers and gives up halfway. Sweat had already soaked through the gray Walmart vest. I stepped forward, offered a hand like you do, and said, "Hey, you new here?" He looked at my hand like I'd offered him a dead mouse, then muttered, "Name's Travis." No smile. No handshake. Just that blank, too-flat stare. I should have trusted that little shove in my gut, the quiet alarm. But we all swallow those alarms when the rent's due. The first few nights he barely said anything. When he did, it was off in a way that didn't fit shy or funny. More like a misplaced cold logic. One night in sporting goods, I joked, "Man, we need helmets to survive this job." And he looked at me dead serious. "I shot myself in the head once," he said. It didn't do much. He tapped his temple with one finger. "Missed everything important. They say I'm lucky." I laughed the way you laugh when you don't know what else to do. He smiled then, the first real smile, and it felt like someone opened a freezer in my chest. October came and the place filled with cheap Halloween merch, hollow plastic pumpkins, dollar store masks, shelves of knockoff candy. Travis came to work one morning with black thread sewn through his lips, sewn shut like some grim art project. We didn't even recognize him at first. He was standing in the break room, the stitches ragged and crusted, grinning behind them. No one spoke for a long second. He scrawled something on a scrap of paper and held it up like a card. Someone called management. Our supervisor, Paul, the kind of guy who hates confrontation almost more than he hates paperwork, sighed and let Travis talk his way out. "Performance art," he said, and argued it didn't break dress code because it's not a costume. Paul shrugged and said, "Fine. Wear gloves if you're going to bleed." Travis went to work wearing gloves after that, and we joked bitterly that corporate training didn't cover this. He'd disappear during shifts. No one ever saw him walk out the door, but he'd reappear in the strangest places. Around 2:45 a.m. one night, I was back in aisle 14 restocking motor oil, and I rounded a corner and there he was, kneeling in the middle of the aisle, the big hunting knife from the outdoors section in his hand, dragging the blade slowly across his palm like he was testing the edge. I froze. "Travis?" I said, small. He looked up, that smile again, and said, "Don't worry. I'm not going to hurt you. I like you." Something in my stomach turned to ice. We wrote it off officially as a box cutter accident. The security footage that night mysteriously glitched. Later we learned he'd been swallowing whole packs of Coricidin Triple C like candy, an OTC high that had a reputation with younger kids. Travis wasn't a kid. He was older and somehow more stubborn about the danger. He stayed. We learned to work around him the way you learn to live with a leaky roof. Nervous, resentful, and always listening for the drip. He was in his late 20s, but something about him carried a younger, raw edge, like someone who'd grown up angry and been handed the world's edges instead of a map. Most mornings he showed up glassy-eyed, twitching at the margins, muttering to people who weren't there. Once I found him in women's apparel, his palm flat against a mannequin's plastic shoulder, whispering like they were swapping gossip. "They replaced parts of me," he told me later that night, unprompted, as we stood by the loading dock while the rain slicked the asphalt. Doctors, government, doesn't matter. Took pieces out and filled me with other things. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Because you ask questions when somebody says obvious nonsense and you don't want them to ask for you." "Want to see the scar?" he said, pulling up his sleeve so fast it was almost casual. The skin along his forearm was puckered and pale, a thin line that suggested more than a single bad night. I said no. I wish I'd said nothing at all, because once you let someone start talking about things like that, it pulls you into their weather. The worst night started in the parking lot. We were on break, sitting on the curb eating vending machine sandwiches, the fluorescent calm of the store behind us. A patrol car rolled up. Not unusual for the overnight shift. Late-night shoplifters brought cops by the dozen. When the cruiser slowed, Travis stiffened as if the world had tightened around his ribs. "They're here for me," he muttered, without looking at anyone in particular. "Always are." He got up and walked straight to the car like a man going to meet an old friend. Before anyone could move, he leaned in and headbutted the cop through the open window. It was a brutal, precise motion. The officer's face went slack for a second, then everyone moved. Hands, shouts, the thud of bodies against asphalt. They tackled him, slammed him down, cuffs biting into his wrists. He didn't fight. He laughed. Blood poured from a split on his forehead and ran warm into his hairline, while his eyes rolled back as if he'd just scored some private high. The sound he made was a brittle, delighted thing, cut through the chaos and made my skin crawl. We thought that would be the end of it. We didn't expect him back a week later, walking through the automatic doors like nothing had happened. Apparently, he'd shown up at the station with mental health paperwork and threatened a discrimination suit if they didn't reinstate him. Paul, our supervisor with a spine made of bendable plastic, shrugged and handed him a fresh vest. No one on the floor asked questions that mattered. We all had mouths to feed. For all the madness, Travis seemed to have money. I never figured out how. He barely worked full shifts, spent most nights wandering the parking lot or sitting under the flicker of the storm lights, and yet he would pull stacks of 20s and 100s from his pockets like it was no big deal. Once I lent him an old Nirvana bootleg CD, a beat-up thing I actually cared about, and he broke it by accident. The next day, he dropped a replacement on my hand and pushed $300 across the counter with the kind of smile that felt like a transaction and a threat rolled together. I didn't want it. I told him, but he smiled and said, "You don't refuse." Not from me. That more than the broken music scared me. People like Travis didn't do favors for free. Gifts carried weight. They demanded something in return even if it wasn't named aloud. I left after 6 months. The tension had worn me thin. The nights had started to give me tremors in the morning, and I'd grown tired of shrugging at the things we all pretended not to see. Even so, he stayed in my head longer than he should have. A few years later, he found me on Facebook. At first, his messages were small and harmless. A thumbs up, a comment about a song I'd posted. Then they edged into protection and possession. "I heard your song. Real good stuff. Still got your back. Always," he wrote once at 2 a.m. A second message followed. "If anyone ever messes with you, I'll bury them." Sometimes I answered with a cautious thanks. Sometimes I didn't answer at all. He started showing up at shows. Not threateningly, at least not at first, just sitting in the back smiling, watching. The smile was the same one I'd seen in the break room behind bloodied thread, equal parts warmth and something else I couldn't name. It made the hair on my arms bristle. Looking back now, I don't think Travis was pure evil. I think he was a patchwork of things people refused to help. Untreated mental illness, self-medication, trauma that never got a voice. Maybe a mind that had broken in ways most of us couldn't even see. Still, he liked me. That is probably why I'm still here. People tell stories about guardian angels. Mine, apparently, is a self-mutilating, unkillable Walmart stalker who smiles like a knife and keeps conspiracies in his head. When I get a message from him at 2 a.m., 2 things hit me at once. A cold, gut-deep dread and a weird, terrible comfort. In a world full of monsters, it's a perverse kind of safety to have one who's obsessed with protecting you. I sleep badly, but I sleep. And right now, I'll admit that feels like something. I was just trying to get home. That was it. It had been one of those days. The kind that makes your shoulders feel like you've been carrying bricks and blurs the edges of everything. I had one last errand before I could crash. Cat litter, milk, a frozen dinner. Walmart in Clay Hollow, Kentucky. The only 24-hour place for miles, squeezed behind a gas station and a pawn shop that looked like it had a past. I went there late a lot, when the aisles were quiet and the people working were too exhausted to be anything but polite. It was past 11:30 p.m. when I pulled in. A few carts lay abandoned like they'd been dropped mid-thought. One had rolled halfway into a space near the entrance. The lot lights hummed that thin insect-high buzz and a damp cold clung to my hoodie. I told myself, 10 minutes. In and out. I parked by the side entrance, grabbed my reusable bag from the passenger seat and went inside. Mr. Arnold, the greeter who used to work at the lumber mill, gave me his usual nod. "Burning the midnight oil again, Ellie." His voice was raspy but familiar. He always sounded like he'd been around longer than the fluorescent bulbs. "Always," I said, forcing a smile I could feel at the edges of my mouth. Inside, the store was the kind of quiet that makes your footsteps loud. Somewhere a stalker was shuffling cans in the soda aisle, and I could hear the dull thump of the floor buffer way over by electronics. I moved with purpose, litter, milk, dinner. No scrolling, no lingering. The total was maybe $23. I remember thinking, as the cashier handed me the receipt, that it was a waste of time to be tense over groceries, that the world wasn't out to get me. By the time I returned to the car, the lot seemed emptier. The air felt heavier. That odd pressure you get right before a thunderstorm, except the sky was clear and the moon was thin. I shrugged it off as tiredness and pulled out of my spot, making the wide curve around the loading docks toward the exit. Then a car appeared, a silver Nissan Altima, coming the wrong way across the lot, moving too fast. I had half a second to brake. The tires squealed, the belt latched hard against my chest, and my purse slid off the seat and clattered onto the floor. For a beat, I just sat there, the color drained from my hands. The Altima stopped so close in front of me that I could see the driver's jaw under his scruffy cap. He turned his head slowly and stared. Mid-30s, maybe. The passenger, bigger, bald, wearing a sleeveless shirt despite the cold, leaned forward as if the two of them were measuring me against some invisible line. I gave a little shake of my head. The universal, "Are you kidding me?" Hoping they'd move. The driver's mouth split into a grin like he'd heard something funny. Then he floored it and peeled toward the side exit, tires screaming against asphalt. I sat frozen another few seconds with my heart thumping like a fist against my ribs. Then I eased forward and took the right turn out of the lot. I didn't think I was following the same direction as them. At least I didn't mean to be. I turned onto Hallard Road, the narrow stretch that passes the old grain silos and then opens up toward my apartment, maybe 10 minutes on a good night. I settled into the lane, told myself to calm down, to breathe. My hand still trembled on the wheel. That's when headlights appeared in my rear view, close and sudden. The Altima, the same car, the same guys. At first I tried to rationalize, maybe it was coincidence, maybe they were headed home too. But they drove up like they were attached to me, then started flashing high beams over and over. The light slammed into my mirrors in staccato bursts, and the feeling in my stomach went cold and heavy all at once. They were tailgating me so close I couldn't see their headlights anymore. Only a white glare filling my rear view. The driver began weaving side to side, revving his engine like he wanted to make me flinch, and then started flashing lights in a frantic pattern that felt like an attempt to blind me. I sped up, they matched me. I tapped my brakes lightly, hoping the tiny warning would make them back off. It didn't. Instead, the Altima jerked up beside my car with the window down. The guy in the passenger seat was shouting. I couldn't hear the words over the wind, but he waved something long and narrow in the air that caught the streetlight. A screwdriver. That was when my confusion finally snapped into survival. No patrol cars, no other late-night drivers. Nothing between me and those two men. I didn't want to lead them to my apartment, so I made a sharp left into a gravel pull-off by an old bait shop whose paint peeled like curling bark. I thought they'd pass me. They turned in right behind, skidding across the gravel and settling in to block the only exit. No. I locked the doors and slammed the gear into reverse to back out, but the Altima sat angled so tight it boxed me in. I could hear yelling now, voices rough and close. Both doors popped open. One guy stood with the screwdriver out, holding it like a threat. The other cracked his knuckles and jogged toward my car with that slow, sick smile of someone enjoying someone else's fear. I fumbled for my phone. No signal, of course. They started pounding on the windows, fists making the glass ring. The screwdriver guy tried the driver's handle, locked. He stepped back, looked at the other guy and said, "Break it." I screamed, the sort of raw, involuntary sound that comes from somewhere beneath you. The scream flew out and startlingly carried. From behind the bait shop, I heard fast, heavy footsteps, then more voices. 3 men came running through the back fence. One had a flashlight cutting a harsh cone across the gravel. Another shouted, "Hey, what the hell are y'all doing?" For a moment, everything froze. The 2 by my car hesitated, suddenly smaller. "Go," the screwdriver guy barked, and they sprinted back to the Altima. Tires screamed, gravel flew, and the car peeled out so fast it nearly clipped one of the men. Then it was gone, a flash of metal and noise down the road. My hands shook so badly I couldn't even unbuckle my seatbelt. An older man in a camo jacket knocked on the glass and asked if I was all right. I nodded, barely able to speak. He told me he'd been behind the shop smoking and had seen the car pull in, and something about it looked wrong. "You want us to call someone?" he asked. I managed to say yes, and he let me use his phone to dial 911. It took about 15 minutes for the sheriff to arrive. The Altima was long gone by then. I gave my statement, stumbling over details and trying to describe faces I only had a few seconds to study. They asked if I got a plate number. No. They asked about cameras. None in that dead-end lot. It was the kind of report that ends up in a file and often nowhere else. Nothing ever came of it. My chest kept pounding for a long time afterward. An older man, Earl, leaned on the glass and said he'd been smoking behind the shop and saw the Altima pull in, and he insisted on staying until help came. He sounded steady in a way that made me breathe easier. When the sheriff arrived, the deputy looked worn but professional. He asked the usual questions, wrote everything down, and said they'd check the area. "No plate, no cameras," he repeated, the words landing like a practiced disappointment. He promised to patrol the neighborhood and take the report, but his tone didn't promise much more that night, too. Afterward, nights felt different. I stopped going to that Walmart alone after dark, started carrying pepper spray, had a dash cam installed, and kept my doors locked even when pumping gas. To this day, when someone flashes their headlights behind me, even once, I flinch. I learned how fast an ordinary night can twist into something that never lets you sleep the same way again. I never liked going to Super Art on Sundays. It wasn't the crowds or the long lines, I could deal with those. It was the kind of people the place drew after dark. Westbourne might sound like a sleepy Midwestern town, the kind where neighbors wave and leave their doors unlocked, but that's just the picture the travel brochures sell. The other side, the one tourists don't see, is cracked pavement, meth clinics squatting next to gas stations, and people muttering to themselves in broad daylight. It was late summer. I remember that with sharp clarity. Hot, sticky air that clung even after the sun went down. I'd been running errands all day, working through that half-conscious haze you get after too little sleep, and completely forgot I was out of dish soap, deodorant, and those little face wipes that kept me feeling almost human after a 10-hour shift. The supermarket was the only place still open, so I swung into the lot around 9:45 p.m. I parked near one of the side entrances. The big sodium lamps overhead buzzed like angry wasps, their light smearing the cracked asphalt in that sickly orange hue that makes everything look wrong. The place was unusually quiet, and I remember thinking oddly that it felt peaceful. An older man trudged by, pushing a cart stacked with Gatorade. A little boy clutched a balloon while his mom barked into her phone. Too loud, too distracted. Just another Sunday night, except not quite. I noticed him the second I stepped out of my car. He stood near the cart return, maybe 20 feet away. Short, 5'2" maybe. Bald, scruffy beard like he hadn't touched a razor in weeks. He wore a grimy green jacket despite the heat, and his shoes didn't match. One black, one white. He was pacing in tight, compulsive circles, muttering to himself. At first I thought maybe Bluetooth, or rehearsing a grocery list. Something mundane. But when I walked closer, I saw his hands were empty. His eyes wide, glassy, too bright under the buzzing lamps. He limped, one leg dragging stiff like it didn't bend right, and the words spilling from his mouth. My stomach tightened when I caught them. It was the tooth, but it ain't the tooth. It's the blood. It's the blood. You smell it, don't you? I slowed my stride. Not stopped, not scared, yet. I'd worked at downtown shelters. I'd seen people tweaking, spiraling, unmoored. Usually they were just noise and shadows. You kept walking, didn't make eye contact, and they left you alone. Not this one. The moment I passed within 3 feet of him, he spun so fast I didn't even register it until it happened. Wham! He punched the woman walking directly behind me. One clean, brutal strike to her face. She dropped like paper, her phone cartwheeling out of her hand. The sound of her skull meeting pavement, God, the crack of bone against concrete stayed lodged in my head for months afterward. I froze. Everyone froze. That silence, thick, unreal. The kind where the world just stops because your brain can't compute what it's seeing. Then, like someone hit play on a nightmare, the bald man bolted toward a tall guy in a red hoodie by the cart corral. The man was massive, 6'3" at least, built like a linebacker. But the bald guy lunged at him like something feral, clamping his arms around his waist and dragging him down. And then the screaming. "Can you feel this now, Mary? Can you?" His voice tore through the lot, high and ragged. He slammed his forehead into the man's face. Again. Blood sprayed the ground in arcs, glistening under the lights. The tall man thrashed, tried to shove him off, but the smaller guy had that terrifying, unnatural strength you only see in people completely gone. Each headbutt echoed sharp and hollow like gunfire. You could hear bones giving way. I don't remember deciding to move. Something primal in me took over. My legs carried me backward, behind a concrete pillar while my hands fumbled out my phone. I pressed 911 with fingers that felt like they didn't belong to me. "Supermarket on Greystone Avenue." I whispered into the phone, my voice cracking as I tried not to sob. "There's a man, he's attacking people in the parking lot. He's covered in blood. Please hurry." Across the lot, under the buzzing orange glow of the sodium lamps, two older men, maybe in their 60s, tried to step in. I watched it happen in a kind of sick, slow-motion clarity. The first man reached for the attacker's arm, and the bald man spun, shoving him so hard he flew backward into the cart rack. The metal clanged like a bell. He didn't get back up. The second man tried swinging a plastic bag, a plastic bag at the attacker's head, maybe thinking it would startle him. But the bald man caught it mid-swing, yanked the older man forward and slammed his face down onto a car hood. The sound was like a hammer hitting meat. The worst part wasn't the violence itself, it was his smile. A blood-slick, toothy grin stretched across his face, his teeth pink with spit and blood. He looked like a man performing, a showman drunk on the chaos he'd made. He stepped back from his victims, arms spread wide, head tilted up as if waiting for applause. "You see it now, Mary? You see it?" He howled, spit flying from his lips in glistening arcs. By the time the sirens cut through the night, echoing down Greystone, he'd become a vision of something inhuman. He was foaming at the mouth, actual foam, white and bubbling at the corners. His face and hands glistened slick and red under the lights, some of it his own, most of it not. When the first cop car rolled in, lights flashing, he didn't run. He charged. He sprinted straight at the car, screaming something about God's engine and burnt veins. They tasered him mid-stride. The wires stuck, his body seized, and he went down hard, convulsing on the pavement but still screaming. Two separate officers interviewed me later. I sat on the curb under a blanket someone had brought out from the store, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold a cup of water. They asked for every detail, what I'd seen, what I'd heard, what the man had said. I gave it all to them, my voice sounding far away in my own ears. Later, they told me he'd been high out of his mind. PCP, bath salts, meth, maybe all of it at once. He'd had no weapons, just his fists and his madness. No one ever figured out who Mary was. The woman he'd punched had a shattered nose and a concussion. The man he'd tackled needed facial reconstruction surgery. One of the older men had a fractured collarbone. I know all this because I checked the local paper obsessively for weeks, scrolling headlines long after I should have been asleep. But I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't. Every time I shut my eyes, his face would flash there, bulging eyes, the blood-slick smile. I could still hear the wet crack of the woman's skull against the concrete, echoing like a memory that refused to fade. I stopped going to the supermarket completely. I started ordering everything online. I signed up for self-defense classes. I carried pepper spray like a teenager walking home from school. Even now, years later, I keep one eye on everyone in every parking lot, always wondering what their story is, what's ticking behind their eyes, what they hear when no one else is listening. People say horror is in ghosts, demons, things that creep through walls at night. They're wrong. Horror is a parking lot under sodium lights. Horror is a stranger who snaps for no reason. Horror is aisle 14, where a woman never even made it inside for her groceries. And horror is knowing no one will stop it before it happens again. I never even wanted that job in the first place. Walmart was supposed to be temporary, a stopgap until I could figure out my next move. I'd just dragged myself down to Lakewood, Florida after a nasty breakup, crashing at my cousin Kendra's place while I got my feet under me. The plan was simple: work nights, save up, and start fresh. Clean slate. That first week blurred by. Price checks, returns, awkward hellos at the door. I bounced between the customer service counter, electronics, and cosmetics wherever they needed me. It wasn't glamorous, but it wasn't unbearable either. Most of the crew were decent. High school kids working part-time, older ladies who'd been there for years, and a handful of people like me just trying to scrape by. It was a Thursday night when everything shifted. I was on the returns desk around 7:45 p.m. The line was steady but not overwhelming. I remember I was mid-sentence with a woman arguing over a dented laundry basket when a voice broke through the noise. "Hey, EA. Wow, it's been forever." I looked up. A guy stood a few feet away, jeans, camo hoodie, scuffed boots. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. His hairline was already fading, but his face had this strange, boyish softness. There was something naggingly familiar in his eyes, though I couldn't place it. "It's me, Lucas," he said with a little laugh. "Lucas Gallagher. From Gulfside High," and it hit. Senior year, Gulfside. He was that quiet kid in the back of class, the one who never really spoke up. I faintly remembered him in earth science, head down, scribbling in notebooks. "We'd never hung out? Oh, wow." "Yeah, I remember," I said, forcing a polite smile. "Been a long time, huh?" "Yeah, totally." He grinned. "You look exactly the same, though." Wild. He didn't buy anything, just lingered at the counter, chatting about where I'd been, what I was doing. Nothing overtly creepy, just a little stilted, awkward. When he finally walked off, he gave me a small wave. "Good seeing you again. Hope to catch you around." That night I saw a Facebook request from him. Lucas Gallagher. I didn't think twice. Clicked accept, why not? He seemed harmless. I was wrong. At first it was little things. Likes on old posts, years old ones, stuff buried from 2-3 years back. Then came comments, beautiful as ever. "Crazy how I always knew you'd turn out this perfect. We should catch up. Coffee sometime." Then the messages started. "Was really cool seeing you again. Always wanted to talk in school but didn't have the guts. You were my dream girl back then. Still are." I ignored him at first, tossed a generic thumbs up to one of his messages. But by the next day my inbox was flooding. Message after message, all from him. Then my friend Max sent me a screenshot. Lucas had sent him a friend request. Same with my coworker June. My cousin Kendra. Even a guy I hadn't spoken to in years. That's when the unease started gnawing. How the hell did he get my number? The first text hit at 10:33 p.m. Friday. "Hey Issa, hope I'm not bugging you. Wanted to say I had a dream about you last night, lol." I froze. My number wasn't on Facebook. I'd never given it to him. Then my phone rang. His name. I let it go to voicemail, my chest tightening. A minute later, another text. "Why aren't you answering?" Did I say something wrong? My hands shook as I typed back, keeping it as neutral as I could. "Hey, I think you're a nice guy, but I'm seeing someone. I don't think we should keep chatting like this. I hope you understand." That's exactly what I typed back. Kept it polite, neutral. My thumb hovered over the send button before I finally pressed it. He didn't take it well. The next week I spotted him 3 separate times. Once at the little coffee shop near my apartment. He waved at me like we were close friends. Another time at Target, he appeared in the next aisle with a plastic basket and said, "Guess we think alike, huh?" Then once more in the Walmart parking lot, leaning against his car, waiting. My manager, Diego, noticed me acting jumpy and pulled me aside behind the counter. "Everything good, Ella?" he asked quietly. I forced a nod. "Yeah, I'm fine." I didn't want to make drama. I'd only been there a few weeks. But the truth was, I wasn't fine. Then came the email. I still have it saved. 6 paragraphs long, it read like a confession and an accusation rolled into one. He wrote about how he used to watch me in high school, how he'd always known we were meant to be. He listed names of guys I'd been friends with and accused me of letting them in while ignoring him. You smile at strangers but act like I'm the weird one. You belong with me, I feel it. I've always felt it. You'll regret making me feel invisible. He knew my schedule. He wrote, Mondays you get off at 9 woo. Wednesdays you always go to the gym. Fridays Taco Bell after your shift I see you. I'm always near. By the end my hands were shaking. It felt like the words themselves were wrapping around my throat. I told Kendra everything. She freaked out. She helped me save all the messages, screenshots, and emails. She was the one who insisted I file a police report. The officer who took my statement, Officer Warren, was calm but firm. You did the right thing coming in, he said. This isn't just creepy. It's stalking. He's watching you. He's threatening you. We can file for a protective order. Lucas was called in for questioning. I heard he denied everything, claimed I was messing with him, that I'd led him on, said we'd been reconnecting, said I was playing games. He got a warning and a restraining order. That was it, but it didn't stop. I started seeing his car outside the gym. One night after my shift, I walked out to the parking lot and found a single flower taped to my windshield with a note. You can't stop fate. Security footage was useless. He wore a hat, kept his head down. I called the cops again. They documented everything, but without proof he was violating the order, they couldn't arrest him. I barely slept for weeks. I changed my number, deleted Facebook, started carpooling with Kendra, got rides home from coworkers. I even switched shifts just to throw him off. One night after a double shift, I left work with Diego. The lot was mostly empty. He offered to walk me out. That's when we saw it. A beat-up gray sedan, engine running, headlights off, parked across from the entrance. Diego narrowed his eyes. That your stalker? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The car sped off as soon as Diego started walking toward it. That was the last time I saw Lucas. I don't know what changed. Maybe the threat of arrest finally scared him. Maybe someone got through to him. Maybe he just found someone else to fixate on. All I know is he disappeared. I still check over my shoulder sometimes. I still flinch when my phone rings from an unknown number. I still keep pepper spray on my keychain. Working at Walmart was supposed to be temporary, but some things don't leave you when the shift ends. In a town where people disappear quietly, no one really notices when a man starts to rot. I swore I'd never work retail again. After 3 years in logistics and one miserable stint at a call center, I promised myself I was done with fluorescent lights and clock watching. But rent is rent, and when I lost my job last fall, desperation shoved me back into a blue vest. That's how I ended up as a floor associate at East Bend Supercenter, basically a rebranded Walmart clone on the outskirts of Greenwood, Indiana. They stuck me in dry goods and pharmacy overflow, which meant stocking shelves and answering random questions about allergy meds I wasn't even remotely qualified to explain. Most days the work was numbing. People in pajamas asking where the melatonin was. Couples bickering over shampoo brands. Kids crying while tossing Skittles into carts. After a while it all blurred together. But what happened one Tuesday in early March that I'll never forget? Even writing this now feels like dredging up a memory from a fever dream. The day began like any other dead shift afternoon, 3:45 p.m. I was zoning aisle 16 in the health section, pulling boxes forward so the shelves looked full. Everything was routine. The fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, some kid wailing near toys, the steady beep of registers up front. I was alone. Adult diapers, heating pads, Epsom salts. The kind of monotonous stretch that makes your brain feel like oatmeal. I had one earbud in, half listening to a true crime podcast when it hit me. A smell. It was vile, like rotting meat left in the sun, sewage, and some sharp chemical edge all tangled together. The kind of stench that sticks to the back of your throat. I gagged, yanking my collar over my nose, eyes scanning for a spill. Maybe a busted product, or some kid's accident. That's when I heard footsteps. Slow, uneven. One heel dragging like it couldn't fully lift. A man rounded the corner. Tall, 6'2", maybe 6'3". His face long, eyes sunken so deep they seemed carved out. He wore an oversized, grimy hoodie, its cuffs fraying, and cargo pants that hung off his frame like curtains. On his left foot was a boot. On his right, layers of filthy, stained fabric wound tight like makeshift bandages. I instinctively stepped aside, forcing a customer service smile. "Hey there," I muttered. He didn't even glance at me, just kept moving, leaving that smell trailing behind him like invisible smoke. For a split second, my brain went cruel. Jesus, man, ever heard of a shower? Then I noticed his hand gripping the cart. His fingernails were black, not dirty but black beneath, like the flesh itself was rotting. His knuckles gleamed with a waxy tightness, skin stretched too thin over bone. My fake smile faltered. Something was wrong with this guy. Really wrong. It wasn't the first strange thing to happen here. Just a month earlier, another associate quit on the spot after finding a guy passed out behind the pet aisle. Turned out he'd shoplifted a bottle of cough syrup and chugged it until he blacked out. That's East Bend for you. We get our share of drifters. Being so close to the freeway, all kinds wander in. But this man wasn't high. He wasn't muttering or lashing out. He wasn't even distracted. He was purposeful, like every step mattered. Like there was only one thing in his head and nothing else in the world existed. He turned down the short aisle leading toward the pharmacy counter. I stayed frozen, peeking past the end cap, rows of vitamins and low-dose aspirin framing the view. At the counter stood a woman, holding a bottle of cough syrup and a prescription bag, chatting casually with the pharmacist, and the man just kept walking toward her. Jazz was small, petite, all bone and tight nerves, and she always worked Tuesdays in the late afternoon. I watched her from the end of the aisle as the man shuffled in behind her. The instant he stepped near, she stiffened like a string had been pulled taut. She half-turned, caught a breath of whatever he was carrying, and I could see her eyes twitch. Her mouth pressed into a hard line. She didn't say anything, but the change in her was loud as a shout. She finished at the counter, grabbed her things, and hurried off. The man moved up to the window right after her, and that's when everything in the fluorescent-lit world of East Bend tipped over. 1 p.m., I drifted closer under the pretense of facing a new case of vitamins on the end cap. I couldn't hear every word. Customers, registers, and the podcast in my ear turned speech into static. But I saw Jazz lean forward, eyebrows nodding. Concern tightened her face. He was murmuring, one hand constantly gesturing toward his lower leg. Then with this agonizing slowness, he began rolling his pant leg up. It looked like he was fighting gravity to bend. Jazz leaned over the counter to get a better look, and whatever she saw made her recoil as if someone had slapped her. She covered her mouth. I felt my stomach flip and moved toward the counter without thinking. Instinct does that, pushes you into motion before the brain signs off. He peeled away the cloth. Gauze, sock, who knows, past the calf. A hole stared back at us. Not a cut, a crater. The lower flesh of his leg had been eaten away into a wet, yawning cavity. Yellow-gray meat puckered at the edges, a dark green ring crawling outward, and something white glittered deep down where tendon or bone might be. Flies circled the wound like vultures arranging a plan. I hadn't registered them until they were there, buzzing this small, obscene orchestra. The smell hit full force. Raw meat, ammonia, hot trash in July, so sharp it made my eyes water. I staggered back and nearly dropped the bottle of vitamins I'd been holding. "Sir, you need to go to the hospital right now," Jazz said, voice trembling but fast. "This is serious. You could lose the leg." Her words scrambled against the hum of the store. He shook his head, something mumbled beyond comprehension. "Sir, listen to me," she pressed. "You need an ambulance. This could be septic. Do you hear me? You could die." I remember thinking the word septic like it was lifted from a horror flick. Necrotic, septic, words that used to live only in games and medical shows. But the color behind his eyes was sorrow, not outrage. He looked like an animal that knew it was cornered. 4 p.m. I stepped up. "Hey man," I said, offering my phone like it was a lifeline. "Do you want me to call someone? An ambulance, maybe?" He turned toward me. His eyes were dull, like driftwood left too long in salt water. For a heartbeat, something soft and human flickered there. Shame, I think. "Don't," he rasped. The voice was thin, wet. "Please don't," Jazz spoke over him. "Yes, call, do it now." He's not thinking straight. I didn't wait for permission. I hit 911 and gave our address with the practiced calm of someone trained to read crisis and report it. While I talked to the dispatcher, the man stared at me with this pleading, small animal sadness like he expected mercy and thought we would be the ones to give it. Then, suddenly he pulled the pant leg down, turned away and walked out. No shouting, no sprint. Just that uneven hobble, a heavy thud from the boot, and a soft, flapping slap from the wrapped foot. Jazz yelled after him. I did too, uselessly, my voice swallowed by the store. He didn't look back. 7 p.m. EMTs showed up maybe 10 minutes later, bright uniforms and businesslike faces. We watched the security footage together. The medic stared at the screen, then at us. By the looks of that wound and how he was acting, one of them said quietly, he may not have survived much longer without treatment. The smell, they noted, suggested a deep, advancing infection. They searched the parking lot and the bus stop, spoke to panhandlers and a night driver, but the man was gone. No trace, no hospital intake, no ambulance report, nothing. He had simply dissolved back into the kind of anonymity our town does best. For weeks I checked every channel I could. Local news, missing persons posts, the fire department blotter. Nothing. No John Doe, no match. It was like he'd been erased between the aisles. But I remember his eyes. That quiet resignation, like a person who has already decided how the story ends. I remember the smell catching me again later, in the same aisle, while I shoved adult diaper boxes forward as if that motion could fix anything. For a second, only a second, I swore I smelled that rot. That faint ammonia drift of a man dissolving. I left the boxes and ran out into the parking lot. No one was there. Sometimes, nights when the world is too still, I picture him hobbling through alleys and overgrown backyards, a rag around his foot, becoming less and less until all that's left is the scent of him. The worst part is thinking no one will remember or bury him. No headstone, no name carved into anything. Maybe he'll just vanish like so many do. Maybe the only people who ever will remember are me and now you. I was 20 that summer, working at Walmart corporate when everything shifted. Not that I mattered much, just a marketing temp in the internship program. One of those shiny next-gen talent gigs they plaster on college job boards. Really, we were a bunch of undercooked kids. Barely trained, barely paid, pretending we were stepping onto some grand career ladder. That summer, they put together this big company event. Part training, part team building, part PR stunt. The message was supposed to be clear. Walmart invests in its people. Everyone in our regional group was expected to go. 3 days in a warehouse conference center outside Jacksonville. We'd drive down from the Bentonville satellite office in 2 15-passenger vans. That's where it started. We met in the corporate lot early in the morning. The air already thick and sticky with Arkansas humidity. People dragged their bags half awake, clutching gas station coffee like lifelines. I stood off to the side with Marcus, one of the few people I'd call a friend. He was the opposite of me. Loud, always joking, obsessed with comics, and his laugh. It was ridiculous, big and dumb, but it made people feel lighter. Me, I was quiet, always overthinking, always wondering if I belonged. Yo, Marcus said, bumping my shoulder. You think they're gonna make us do trust falls? I think we're in for 6 hours of PowerPoint slides labeled leadership training, I muttered. He barked a laugh. Bet, loser buys dinner. We were supposed to ride in the same van. Bags were loaded, people climbing in, when one of the supervisors, Ray, a guy with a permanent crease between his brows, started waving people around. Hey Marcus, he called. Switch to the other van. We need to even out numbers. Marcus frowned. I was with James. Yeah, I know. Quick reshuffle. You'll still room together when we get there. Marcus shot me a look, half annoyance, half whatever, and headed toward the other van. I followed, but Ray raised his hand. Hold up. James, you stay with Van A, I messed up the count. Just like that, Marcus in one van, me in the other. A stupid little switch. The kind of forgettable logistics that happen on corporate trips. Neither of us thought twice about it. We hit the road mid-morning, US 231 all the way down. 5 hours through open fields, dense woods, and dead zones where even Spotify gave up. Around 5 o'clock, we stopped in a nowhere town off the highway. 1 McDonald's, 1 gas station, $1 General. That was it. Everyone piled out, stretching and laughing. Marcus tossed fries at pigeons, grinning like a kid. I'm buying fireworks on the way back, he said. We loaded up again as the sun bled out. For a while, everything felt normal. Then night came. The stretch between that town and Jacksonville was long, endless blacktop through forest and swamp. No shoulders, no streetlights, barely any traffic. Our van led. Marcus's followed behind. I was half asleep against the window when Ellen, our driver, a soft-spoken woman in her 40s, answered her phone. She spoke low, then suddenly swerved us onto the gravel shoulder. Brakes squealed. The van jolted to a stop. Her voice trembled. "Stay here." We all sat frozen, confusion thick in the air. What's going on? Someone whispered. Ellen hesitated a beat, then her whole face changed. Her hands tightened on the wheel like she was holding on to something that might pull her under. "They crashed," she said, voice small and flat. "The other van crashed." For a long moment, none of us knew what to do. We just sat there. The hum of the engine loud in the silence like it had swallowed our breaths. Then Ellen jerked the wheel and slammed us back onto the road. She put her foot down so hard the van lunged forward. I swear she pushed it to 90. The country blurred by in trees and shadow. I could feel Marcus's laugh in my head, stupid and bright. And I kept thinking that this was some awful joke she was about to tell us. 6 miles later, the road opened into a wall of taillights. Trucks and semis backed up for what looked like forever. People were standing in small groups, pointing, some of them crying. Someone pounded on a hood. Ellen rolled down her window and called out, "What happened?" A man in a John Deere cap just shook his head and said, "You don't want to see." She ignored him, eased onto the grassy shoulder, and we crept forward, tires crunching on dirt and broken glass. That's when I saw the van, the one Marcus had been in, or what was left of it. It lay on its side, completely wrecked. Windows blown out, the metal crumpled. The back doors were popped open. Duffel bags and loose papers littered the highway like confetti frozen in a moment. People were sprawled on the grass, shaking, bleeding, dazed. A girl was sobbing into her phone. One man's arm was bent the wrong way, a shape you don't forget. Devin was screaming he couldn't find his glasses. And then I saw Marcus. He was maybe 30 feet from the wreck, lying in the opposite lane. There are images that don't leave you. This is one of them. His body looked wrong. Not a nice way to put it, but true. He'd been thrown clear when the van flipped. The side window had given, or he slipped through the belt somehow. He'd landed in the path of oncoming traffic. An SUV hit him. Didn't even slow down. The driver kept going. No one ever found that car. Caitlin, the girl driving their van, crawled out and kept saying the same thing over and over as the EMTs got there. He was still moving. He was trying to get up. She was screaming through the shock that he lifted his torso, tried to pull himself up with his arms. She told us he looked like he was trying to see something above him. Then the SUV struck. Then he was gone. Those words replayed in my head for weeks. He tried to get up. He tried to get up. After that, the night collapsed into flashing lights and sirens. Police took statements. Cameras flickered. Someone kept offering us bottled water like that would fix anything. I didn't say a word until 3 in the morning. I just stared at the grass, still dark with blood and rain, and felt hollowed out. They finally put us in a hotel before dawn. None of us slept. The corporate office flew counselors in the next day. They called it a tragic accident. Offered 2 days off and the option to return to training when we were ready. No one went back. Marcus's family had a closed casket funeral. I didn't go. I couldn't bear the thought of looking at something meant to hold a person who still felt present in everything. His laugh in the break room. His ridiculous comic book debates, the way he bumped my shoulder and called me a loser. I kept thinking it should have been me. I had been in that van for 30 seconds, just long enough for Ray to switch us back. 30 seconds I could have used forever to die. That thought ate at me. Afterward, the dream started. In one, I could feel the belt snapping. In another, I tasted blood and glass and heard the sound of my bones breaking, loud as a bell. I'd wake up choking, palms wet, convinced for a moment the smell was real. It wasn't always violent in the dream. Sometimes it was just the quiet image of Marcus lying there, eyes wide, like he was trying to find something he couldn't. The memory stuck to me in the day. Too, the way the light on his face had looked wrong. The white of his eyes, the way his hands had been bent. You try to organize it into a reason, some pattern that would make sense. Maybe if I had said something, laughed louder, sat in a different spot, but there wasn't one. 12 years later, I still work in logistics, still with Walmart, but I hide behind a desk where I can. I avoid highways whenever possible, drive 10 miles under the limit, never get into a van if I can help it. Sometimes I catch myself scanning every rearview mirror, waiting for a flash of taillight that won't slow down. I think about Marcus more than I want to. He was kind in a blunt, messy way. Funny as hell. He didn't deserve it. Sometimes I still whisper into the dark when I'm driving alone on a back road and tell him I'm sorry. I say it over and over because it's the one thing I can manage that feels like an action. I don't have an answer for why it happened to him instead of me. There's no reason, no pattern, just a careless rearrangement in a parking lot and a long, dark stretch of road. One voice telling you to switch vans. That's the only difference. Rest easy, Marcus. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never used to be scared of going to work. I didn't like it, not really. Who loves stocking shelves at 3 a.m. under buzzing fluorescent lights, standing on tile so cold it seeps through your shoes, all while waiting for the next customer to complain about something you don't control? But it was a job, and jobs mean money, and money means rent gets paid. Rent doesn't stop just because you're tired. This was in Camden Falls, a middling little town off Highway 18 in western Kentucky. There wasn't much worth mentioning there. Just the big, super Walmart, a few scattered gas stations, and Margot's, the greasy old diner where the waitresses called everyone Han and carried the smell of menthols in their uniforms no matter how much they washed them. I got hired on the night shift after my cousin Jeremy, who'd been working backstock, put in a word for me. He told me they needed dependable people for freight and overstock. I didn't mind the hours. In fact, I preferred them. Quieter, less drama, fewer people to deal with. That all changed when he got transferred in. Brent. I'll never forget the first time I saw him. It was a Tuesday night. I know because I was stuck in aisle 7, rotating cans, and the store radio had played Sweet Home Alabama 3 times already that night. I was on my knees, lining up green beans into neat little towers, when he walked past me and deliberately kicked one of the cans I'd just stacked, sent it clattering under the shelf, out of reach. He didn't apologize, didn't even acknowledge it. Just smirked. Dirty blonde hair that looked like dried straw and eyes that didn't fit his smile. Flat, empty, like the smirk was just something his mouth was doing without the rest of him joining in. Something was off about him immediately. He had this way of hovering, standing too close, leaning in just a little too long like he didn't understand or didn't care about. Basic personal space. New guy? I asked Jeremy the next morning when we were clocking out. Yeah, Jeremy muttered. Transferred from the Mount Auburn store. Heard he got in some trouble over there. What kind of trouble? Jeremy hesitated, his punch card halfway out of the slot. Broke another associate's nose. Said it happened during unloading. Called it an accident. But? I pressed. Jeremy looked uncomfortable. But? He laughed about it. From then on, Brent made himself impossible to ignore. He was loud, obnoxious, always pushing boundaries just to see who'd react. He'd slap boxes out of people's hands mid-shift, scream random song lyrics in the break room at the top of his lungs, pound on the vending machine like he was trying to kill it when it ate his dollar. The managers did nothing, especially Doug, the overnight lead. Doug just shrugged one night when I complained. Brent's just high energy, he said. Yeah, I muttered under my breath. So is a meth lab. But nobody listened. And slowly, almost deliberately, Brent started zeroing in on me. One night during our 2 a.m. break, I was microwaving a styrofoam cup of noodles, watching the water bubble inside when Brent walked in. He didn't say anything. Just stood in the doorway for a second. Then I noticed what he was wearing. A football helmet. For a second, I thought maybe it was some dumb prank. Then, without warning, he ran full speed across the break room and slammed his helmeted head into the side of mine. White-hot lightning exploded behind my eyes. I collapsed. Off the bench, ears ringing, vision tunneling in on itself. The room tilted sideways like it had been yanked off its axis. What the hell? I croaked, clutching my temple. Brent laughed like it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. Damn, you dropped like a sack of potatoes. I heard a few others laughing too. Nervous chuckles, the kind people make when they don't know what else to do. But nobody helped me. Nobody stopped him. Nobody said a word. I staggered to my feet, head throbbing, and walked out of the break room. I didn't go back. I called off the rest of my shift and drove myself to urgent care, still dizzy, still trying to make sense of why no one had done a thing. The doctor said concussion. I told the manager the next morning, handed over the note, even gave him the nurse's number. Doug shrugged. "Sounds like he was just joking around," he said. After that, things got worse. Brent started taunting me, whistling. Whenever I walked past, blocking the stockroom, humming the Monday Night Football theme like a threat. It was sick. "I'm not scared of you," I said once. He grinned. "You should be." I stopped sleeping. My chest would tighten on the drive to work, and I couldn't eat. Rent still needed to be paid, so I kept going. A week later, at 3:17 a.m., everything snapped. I had just mopped a spill in dairy and was going to drop the mop in the back closet when he stepped out near receiving. "Hey," he said. I kept walking. He moved closer. "You think you're better than me, huh?" Brent growled. "Back off," I warned, my heart pounding. He shoved me. I hit the concrete, and before I could move, he was on top of me, hands on my shoulders, his breath wet and hot. I kicked and clawed. "Get off! I can't breathe!" I screamed, but nobody came. Panic narrowed my world to a spot on the ceiling. I thought I was going to die, covered in cardboard and plastic. Then Jeremy appeared, looking for shrink wrap, he later said, and tackled Brent off me. Brent scrambled up, furious, and vanished out the back exit. The cops were called. I gave my statement. Jeremy backed me up. By morning, Brent was fired. Relief never came. I felt watched for weeks, parking closer to the building and checking over my shoulder. Doug mumbled an apology. Nobody expected it to go that far, and said he regretted not leaving earlier. I quit Walmart 2 months later. I still get headaches. I still flinch when people raise their voices. I still think about how close I came to being a name in a news report. I survived, but barely. Afterward, I couldn't shake the dreams of Isles and his grin. I started arriving early, sitting in my car, staring at the entrance until my hands went numb. Once I swore I saw him in a pickup across the lot, head turning toward the store. It was a delivery driver, but the panic stayed. Doug's apology, an awkward, murmured "I'm sorry," felt thin. Management called it handled. It wasn't. 2 months later, I quit. Headaches came with loud noises, crowds made my skin crawl, and sometimes at night I still often. I was 27 when I agreed to cover a week of lectures for one of my old professors in Birmingham, Alabama. It wasn't some prestigious gig, just a community college that needed a warm body to teach a few behavioral psych classes while the regular instructor recovered from surgery. Free trip, meals covered, and the perfect excuse to see my old roommate Kyle, who I hadn't hung out with since graduation 4 years earlier. He lived just 20 minutes from campus. Back in Tennessee, we'd shared a place for 2 years. Late-night Xbox marathons, burning frozen pizzas, and trading big dreams about who we'd become. Kyle ended up in supply chain management. Not glamorous, but steady. He was renting a 2-bedroom apartment outside the city, near a gas station, a vape shop, and a 24-hour Walmart 5 blocks away. When I called about hotels, he said, "Don't bother. Crash here. I'll clean the guest room. Still got that mattress you helped me haul up 3 flights in '06. It was an easy sell. The schedule worked out perfectly. Lectures in the afternoon, Kyle working second shift until midnight. After, we'd catch up, unwind, maybe grab food. The idea of staying up late like old times actually felt comforting. The first night was simple. He came in around 12:30, tossed his keys on the counter, kicked off his boots, and cracked a beer. I was half dozing on the couch with Planet Earth on mute. "Still a night owl, huh?" He laughed. "Only when someone else buys the drinks," I said. We played Mario Kart on his dusty Wii, laughed like we were 20 again, and by 2 a.m. we were starving. Kyle grabbed his keys. I usually hit Walmart. They restock overnight, places quiet, almost relaxing. I shrugged. "Let's go." That first trip was nothing. Empty aisles, buzzing fluorescents, tossing burritos and pizzas into the cart. We argued about chips. Like always, nostalgic. We did it again the next 2 nights, get baked, get the munchies, walk the silent streets to Walmart like it was some sacred ritual, stock up on junk, and crash at 4 a.m. But Thursday was different. Kyle got home later, close to 1:15. He looked drained. "Rough shift?" I asked. He rubbed his face. "Guy wrecked a dock door backing in blind. Reports took forever. I'm dead. Still down for Walmart?" I hesitated, but he forced a grin. "Yeah, why not? Need coffee and eggs." It was colder than the other nights, sharp air that made each step on the gravel sound too loud, like the crunch echoed overhead. The parking lot was empty except for 2 cars, a rusted sedan by the entrance and a white van across 3 spots, back end facing the docks. "Nice parking job," I muttered. Kyle glanced. "That van's always here. Same spot, I noticed stuff. Night shift perks." Inside was dead silent. No music, just the hum of freezers and buzzing lights. We grabbed a basket, headed for frozen foods. Then came the first weird moment. In the bread aisle stood an older guy, 50s maybe, long beard, camo jacket. He wasn't shopping, just standing with his hands in his pockets, staring straight ahead like he'd forgotten where he was. Kyle gave a polite nod. "The guy didn't move," I whispered. "Friendly neighborhood cryptid." Kyle smirked but kept walking. By the time we hit the snack aisle, the air had shifted. Hard to explain, like stepping into a room right after an argument, tense and heavy. I was reaching for cheddar jalapeno chips when I noticed him at the end of the aisle. Not shopping. Just watching, late 30s. Buzz cut, dark hoodie, baggy jeans, skin pale as paper. His arms hung stiff at his sides, eyes fixed on us like he was made of stone. At first I thought maybe I was blocking his view. I gave a quick half smile, muttered, "Hey," nothing. No nod, no flicker of recognition, just that stare. I turned back toward the shelf, trying to shake it off when Kyle's voice cut in, low and uneasy. "There's another one." Behind us. I glanced over my shoulder. At the far end of the aisle stood a second man, taller, thinner, wearing a beanie and a faded denim jacket. He wasn't watching us. He was staring past us, straight at the guy in the hoodie. "What the hell's going on?" I muttered. "They're not looking at us," Kyle whispered. I shifted my gaze between them. He was right. Their eyes were locked on each other, unblinking, like 2 predators waiting for a signal. "Let's bounce," Kyle said under his breath. I didn't argue. We turned to leave the aisle, barely 3 steps in when a voice cut through the still air. Calm. Cold. "You know why I'm here." I froze. "Hoodie guy." Then the second man's voice, flat and steady. "You don't want to do this." Silence hung for half a breath. Then both of them moved at once. The hooded man reached into his waistband. The other ducked low. "Down!" I yelled, yanking Kyle with me. The world erupted. Pop, 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 pop. Gunfire. Deafening and distant at the same time, like thunder trapped in a tunnel. My elbow slammed against the tile as I dragged us down. Above, a bag of Doritos burst open. Neon orange dust raining like shrapnel. Shelves rattled, metal clanged, glass shattered. My ears screamed with ringing. Kyle was shouting something, words I couldn't catch. Instinct drove us. We crawled, skittering around the end cap, huddling behind a tower of plastic laundry baskets. A bullet cracked open a bottle somewhere behind us, detergent spreading slick across the floor. Another volley, 4, maybe 5 shots, then sudden silence. Footsteps, fast, fading, someone running. We stayed still, pressed flat against the tile, lungs burning. Then the fire exit alarm wailed, shrill and piercing. Another runner. Kyle's voice finally broke through, raw and trembling. Jesus Christ." I was still on the floor, my hands shaking, elbow throbbing where it had hit. "You good?" My whisper felt thin in the heavy air. He nodded, barely. "You?" I managed to nod back. We stood slowly. The aisle looked bombed out. Chips everywhere, glass glittering under fluorescence, streaks of black on the linoleum, shoes or blood hard to tell. We moved toward the front, crouched fast. A cashier I hadn't seen before came running out from behind the counter, tears streaking her face, clutching a radio. She was crying into it, desperate. We told her what we'd seen. She pointed shakily toward the emergency exit, said the cops were already on the way. Cold air slapped my face as we stepped outside, ears still ringing. Within minutes, red and blue lights swallowed the lot. 6, maybe 7 cruisers pulled in, tires screaming. An officer rushed us behind the perimeter, firing questions, descriptions, clothing, direction, weapons. We gave them everything. They found a single shell casing in the snack aisle, drops of blood near the fire exit, but no bodies. One officer muttered, off record, "That hoodie guy probably caught one in the side but kept running." No blood trail to follow. The tall one had vanished, likely slipped out the front. Kyle later told me Walmart shut down for 3 days. Management brought in counselors, posted some hollow sign about valuing safety and resilience. No arrests. No follow-up, like it never happened. Kyle and I never went back. I flew home after my last lecture the next day, but the memory stuck like a splinter. It didn't shatter me, not in some cinematic way, but it rewired something deep inside, a quiet vigilance. Now, whenever I step into a 24-hour store, I scan every aisle end. I watch people's hands. No headphones. Never relaxed. And every time a bag of chips crinkles too loud, my heart jumps. I never thought I'd be the one in a blue vest. 10 years ago, I had a steady job at a manufacturing firm in Charleston. Nothing fancy, but it paid the bills and gave me a sense of direction. Then the layoffs hit. Half the company gone in 1 week. One morning, I was sitting in the conference room discussing new safety training protocols. And by afternoon, I was walking out with a cardboard box of my things while my boss muttered, "We're so sorry." Rent didn't care about sorry. Neither did the power company. My savings disappeared in less than 2 months, and after that, desperation set in. I applied everywhere. Offices, warehouses, anything. Nobody called me back. I wasn't too proud for retail. I just hadn't pictured myself back in it at 34. But bills don't care about pride either. That's how I ended up at Walmart. The store sat off I-26, tucked behind a crumbling Sonic and a Dollar Tree. It was one of the older supercenters, flickering lot lights, ceiling tiles water-stained from leaks, and checkout lines that never seemed to shrink. I figured I'd end up stocking overnight or working a register. Instead, they stuck me in lawn and garden. At first, I was relieved. Compared to grocery or electronics, it was quiet, almost peaceful. I liked the smell of fresh soil, the sound of water misting plants, the way old women would stop to tell me what they were growing that season. For a few hours at a time, I could almost forget my life had gone completely off track. What I didn't know was that lawn and garden handled every holiday setup in the store. Christmas trees, Halloween skeletons, 4th of July flags, even back-to-school bins, that was all ours. And that's where this story starts. It was mid-August, about a week before schools reopened. The AC was struggling against the heat, and sweat clung to my back before my shift even began. I clocked in at 6, grabbed my box cutter, and rolled a flat cart stacked with back-to-school boxes, binders, pens, notebooks, trapper keepers, toward the front seasonal aisle. My job was to get the bins filled before the 8 a.m. rush. I was kneeling down, slicing open a carton of mechanical pencils when a sound cut through the store. At first it was a screech, high-pitched, sharp, unnatural. Then it shifted deeper, louder, echoing off the concrete floors until it felt like it was rattling in my chest. It was the kind of sound that makes you freeze without realizing it, your instincts spiking into fight or flight. I shot up and scanned the aisle. That's when I saw him. A boy, maybe 8 years old, red-faced, sweaty, built like a linebacker. He wasn't just throwing a tantrum, he was coming apart, screaming in front of the bins. "I want 3. He shrieked, spit flying. "3, Mom. I said 3! His mom, maybe early 30s, looked exhausted, her belly swollen with another baby. Her brown hair was twisted into a crooked bun, her tank top plastered with sweat. She held one hand against her stomach and tried to soothe him. "You already have one, Logan," she said softly. "That's enough." "I want the Hello Kitty one too," he screamed, stomping so hard the shelves shook. Off to the side, a little girl, his sister, maybe 5, clutched a box of crayons, eyes wide with fear. Their dad stood a few feet back, tall and lanky, wearing a faded Gamecock shirt and Crocs, scrolling his phone like none of this concerned him. Customers were starting to stare. I backed toward my cart, hoping it would fizzle out. It didn't. The boy let out a guttural howl that didn't sound human and suddenly lunged at his mother, kicking her hard in the stomach. It didn't feel real in the moment. She folded instantly, crumpling to her knees before collapsing onto her side, gasping for air. "Oh my God!" someone shouted behind me. I dropped beside her as two shoppers rushed over. My pulse hammered. The dad finally looked up from his phone. "What happened?" he asked, his voice flat like he hadn't seen a thing. "Your son just kicked her," I yelled, panic burning through me. "She needs help." She was moaning, clutching her belly like it might hold itself together if she just squeezed harder. Her eyes were wide and glassy, breathing shallow. Someone fumbled for their phone. "I'm calling 911, a woman said, and another customer was already yelling for a manager. And the kid. God. The little bastard walked over to the trapper-keeper bin as calm as if he'd just finished a chore, picked out all three, his old one, the Hello Kitty, and a dinosaur one, and tucked them under his arm like they were trophies. He turned to his dad and said, matter of fact, "I'm hungry. I want chicken nuggets." The man looked at his wife being loaded onto a stretcher by EMTs and said nothing. No shouting, no hysteria, no fury. He just nodded once and said, "Okay, bud. Let's go," like they were leaving a playground. I watched them move away, the dad steering the boy toward the McDonald's in front of the store while the little sister wrapped her arms around herself and cried into her own shoulder. We all gave statements. I told the same truth everyone else did. Management filed the report and then, well, business continued. They put up a temporary caution cone, somebody wiped the tile, and the registers kept ringing. No one ever told us what happened to the woman. Rumors floated. She'd miscarried, she'd been admitted somewhere, but no confirmed answer ever came down the chain. All I really know is she never came back through our doors. The kid did. 3 weeks later, I watched him tug on his father's sleeve near the toy aisle, bright-eyed like it had all been some bad dream that belonged to someone else. I wanted to walk up and say something, ask how he could, anything. But the words shrank in my throat. I still can't make sense of it. You'd think that was the worst day I had at Walmart, but it wasn't. It was the loudest. The one that left bruises you could point to. The real horror there crept in slow and quiet. It sank into you like damp into cardboard. You start paying attention to the small violences. How people talk to each other, how quick they are to yell, to shove, to pretend they didn't notice another human in pain. You see parents who scream until their kids flinch. Old men begging for help finding a can of soup while everyone else parts around them, like a current of indifference. You pick up dirty diapers from the shelf, find needles tucked behind energy drinks, sweep chicken bones pushed into the shadow behind a Gatorade display. You stop thinking of people as people sometimes and start cataloging them. Problem, threat, source of trouble. It's how your brain protects itself until it doesn't. 6 months after the trapper-keeper thing, a woman in nothing but a bathrobe and slippers wandered into lawn and garden. Her scalp was raw and bleeding, and she carried an empty baby carrier like a prop in a nightmare. She came right up to me and whispered so close I could feel her breath. "He's still in the ceiling. He's still up there. He follows me." I asked her if she needed help. She screamed, sudden animal, and bit my forearm hard enough to bruise, then ran out the emergency exit before any of us could move. Later we learned she'd escaped from a halfway house and dropped off her child at a fire station hours before. She didn't remember coming into the store. None of us forgot. I stayed 2 years, longer than I should have. The day I quit, I didn't make a scene. I clocked out, took the blue vest off, folded it over my arm, and walked to the parking lot without saying goodbye. I sat in my car for 20 minutes and cried. Not because I was sad in that soft, cinematic way, but because I had survived it. Because the weight of everything inside that store had finally pressed me down and I could feel the cracks. People laugh about Walmart. They make memes, point fingers, and joke about people of Walmart and oversized shirts and bad tattoos. It's easy to make fun of the surface, but the truth is uglier and quieter. Walmart is a pressure cooker. It shows you the exact moment people run out of patience and decency. Tired, broke, hungry, humiliated. Those are the conditions that make some people snap. Some drag others with them, some never come back. And the ones who work there, those of us who see it every shift, we carry those moments like invisible bruises. Every screaming child, every broken family, every time you have to mop up blood from the tile, or talk someone down from a panic attack in aisle 14, you take it home. It sits in your chest when you wake up at 3 a.m., and in your hands when you tie your shoelaces. Walmart didn't kill me. It didn't strip my humanity in a single act. It chipped away at it over and over until I was left wondering whether I was still a person, or just another cog that had learned to keep moving. I couldn't pinpoint when the job stopped feeling like a paycheck and started feeling like survival. Maybe it was the third time I clocked out with tears streaming down my face. Or maybe it was the moment I stopped wearing makeup. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to draw even more eyes than the bright blue vest and plastic name tag already did. My name's Elena Maris. I was 23 when this happened, working at a supermarket in Pine Brook, Georgia. I'd moved there after finishing community college, mostly to help my older sister, who'd just had twins. She needed me close, and I thought it would be a good change. I sent out a bunch of applications, and Supermart called first. They said I'd start in general merchandise, float to wherever I was needed. At the time, I was still naive enough to think, how bad could it be? The pay was garbage, the hours unpredictable, but I told myself it was temporary. The rhythm of the store seeped into me faster than I expected. The shrill beeps of the registers, the canned, chirpy music that looped endlessly overhead, the regulars who drifted in not to shop but to linger, to chat, sometimes to leer. One of them was Curtis. Everyone knew him. 6'4", stocky, mid-40s, always in a faded fishing vest and dark sunglasses he never took off, not even inside. Sometimes he showed up with a group of older buddies, loud men who hung around the front and joked with the youngest cashiers. Their hoots and crude comments were easy for them to dismiss. Just kidding, they'd laugh if anyone complained. But none of it ever felt like a joke. Curtis latched on to me almost immediately. Maybe because I was quiet. Maybe because I smiled too much, trying to seem polite. My mistake was not shutting him down harshly from the beginning. "Where you from, pretty girl?" His gravelly voice always carried too close, his body leaning in like he owned the air between us. "Just around here," I'd answer quickly, inching away, trying to keep it neutral. As he brushed past me that first week, his fingers grazed my waist. "Thought so," he muttered, grinning. "Local girls got that softness to 'em." I went straight to my floor supervisor. Jamie was in her 30s, exhausted from juggling this place with 3 kids at home. She sighed when I told her, "Yeah, that guy's always pushing it, but he spends a lot. Just don't be alone with him." That was the moment I understood the rules here. From then on, Curtis got bolder. He'd wait until I was in an aisle by myself, shelves half-stocked. Sometimes I'd look up and catch him standing at the end of the toy section, just watching. One afternoon he came up behind me, lifted a stuffed bear from the bin and pressed it into the small of my back. "You should smile more, honey," he said, his tone almost playful. "You'd be perfect if you smiled." I jerked forward, my jaw clenched. "Don't touch me." He raised both hands, pretending innocence. "Didn't touch you, touch the bear." "Lighten up," I reported him again. Jamie rubbed her temples. "If he crosses the line next time, I'll get security to walk him out." "But banning him? Not my call. Unless he breaks the law, management won't go that far." Her voice was tired, but my stomach twisted all the same. The following week, Curtis crossed every line. He slapped me hard on the butt, like we were at some drunk college party. Shock seared through me, but before I could think, I spun and slapped him across the face. The sound cracked in the air. For a second, he just stared, wide-eyed. "Feisty," he growled, stepping toward me. I backed up, trembling but steady in my voice. "Don't you ever touch me again!" He laughed low and mean and walked out. Security followed, escorting him out the doors. Not banned, just out for the night. I begged my manager, Ron, to take real action. Ron, who always reeked of stale cologne and wore an expression like smiling cost him something, leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "Look, Elena," he said flatly. "I don't condone it, but customers spend money. You don't want to work retail. Maybe find something else." He turned and walked away, leaving me shaking against the break room wall. I wanted to quit on the spot, fling the vest and the name tag and never look back. But I needed the money. My sister needed help. I stayed. Saturday nights were the worst, understaffed, chaotic, full of people who smelled like entitlement and cheap cologne. That evening I clocked out for my 15 and slipped around the side of the building with the other smokers. The alley was narrow and half hidden from the parking lot, a place of dumpsters and faded graffiti where the fluorescent store light didn't reach. I lit a cigarette because the small ritual steadied my hands. Then something grabbed me from behind. Hard, sudden, fingers digging into my waist, and everything telescoped. The world narrowed to the smell of his cologne and the scrape of gravel under boots. He hauled me backward like I was nothing, my feet lifting off the ground. I saw the lip of the dumpster, the cold cement rushing up at me. Time slowed to the clack of my heart in my ears. I screamed and threw my head back as hard as I could. There was a sick metallic crunch when my skull met the edge. He cursed and let go. Curtis. Adrenaline took over in a way that felt almost separate from me. I spun and drove my heel into him again and again, straight into his groin until he doubled over. Blood was already streaking down his face from somewhere, his nose maybe, and he was gasping in this ridiculous, panicked way. I kept kicking. I wasn't thinking in sentences. I was a wire snapped tight and then released. When he stumbled back, I grabbed the cigarette that had fallen from my mouth, still burning, and pressed it to his forearm. He screamed, "Sharp animal," and I spat right in his face like it would erase everything he'd done. I did not feel like a person then. I felt like a coiled thing that had been set free. Security arrived first, Jason, who always tried to look like he knew what he was doing. And then the police. Curtis was on the ground, moaning and clutching himself, one hand uselessly pressed to a smoldering patch on his arm. Jason came straight for me, his expression gone soft for the first time I'd seen. My hands were shaking so violently I let the cigarette fall and watched it die on the pavement. He helped me sit on the dumpster lip, talking in short, steadying sentences. They took statements. The officer's eyes flicked to my fingers when I admitted I'd used the cigarette. "Self-defense is one thing," he muttered. "But burning someone," he didn't finish. I cut him off. "He dragged me," I said. The tears came then, sudden and hot. "He grabbed me. He was going to—" My voice broke. The rest of the interview blurred like film left in the sun. They cuffed Curtis eventually, and someone bundled him into an ambulance before they booked him. I don't remember the exact charges. Assault, maybe attempted kidnapping. I wanted them to be worse than what they were. I didn't go back inside after that. I didn't clock back in. I didn't say goodbye. I walked to my car and left and felt the world tilt a little more manageable with every block. A few days later, I packed up for Austin. My sister helped me find work at a veterinary clinic. Better hours, quieter people, and no customers who thought their money bought them the right to a woman's body. I've never stepped into retail since. I don't know what happened to Curtis. I heard rumors. Management shuffled, some people fired, maybe an internal review. It felt hollow when I heard it, like rearranging deck chairs after the ship hit the iceberg. They had tolerated him and men like him long enough for it to escalate. Even now, sometimes with the lights off, I can feel his hands around my waist the way memory can make your body remember, before your brain understands. I still hear that low, mocking laugh in places that should be quiet. Mostly I remember how quickly a job that was supposed to be harmless, the minimum wage grind beneath flickering fluorescence, turned into something dangerous. How it only mattered when it finally spilled out into blood and sirens. This wasn't just my story. It's the story of thousands of people standing behind counters and behind registers, learning how to survive while they clock in and out. So the next time you see a tired retail worker who looks jumpy, don't laugh it off. Don't tell them to quit. Maybe ask what they've had to survive just to earn their paycheck. I hadn't planned on going. Tailgate parties were never really my thing. Too loud, too much spilled beer, too many people who couldn't hold their liquor. The kind of chaos that left you smelling like smoke and regret the next morning. But that week had worn me down in ways I couldn't shake. Work was a disaster, one crisis after another. My car had nearly died on the interstate, coughing black smoke until I limped it into the shop. And then there were the calls. Endless missed calls and voicemails from my ex, each one more desperate than the last. Like she'd forgotten or refused to understand that I meant it when I said we were done. So, when Zach texted, "Tailgate at Wally, Lot 9. Everyone's coming. Don't flake." I sat there staring at the screen, thumb hovering, the glow painting my empty apartment in pale blue. After a long minute, I sighed, grabbed a hoodie from the back of the chair and headed out. I figured I'd show up, have a drink, maybe let the noise drown out the weight pressing on me. The Walmart had been closed since 10. Lot 9 sat on the far end, by the garden center where no one parked during the day. That made it the unofficial party spot. By the time I rolled in, the place was alive. Trucks circled in a loose horseshoe, tailgates down, camp chairs scattered. LED strips glowed red and blue in the dark. Music thumped from half a dozen Bluetooth speakers, and somebody had a fire pit burning in the bed of their truck. Definitely not legal, but no one cared. I parked a little off to the side, grabbed a warm IPA from my back seat, and walked toward the noise. Familiar faces greeted me. Hugs, handshakes, that easy laughter that makes you feel like maybe you belong after all. Zach spotted me grinning wide and clapped me hard on the back. He shoved a foil-wrapped hot dog into my hand. "Didn't flake," he said. I smirked. "Only because I ran out of reasons to be alone tonight." He didn't catch the weight in my voice, just laughed and went back to clowning around. I unwrapped the hot dog, took a bite, and that's when I noticed him. He stood near the edge of the group. Not drinking, not talking, just watching. Big guy, late 30s, maybe early 40s, built thick like a linebacker who hadn't slowed down much with age. He wore a tank top even though the night had bite in the air. And across his knuckles was a fresh red line, thin but sharp, like he'd punched something recently. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't really blinking either. I forced myself to look away, let the chatter and bad music pull me back in. I laughed when everyone else laughed, nodded through small talk, sipped the lukewarm beer like it could dissolve the tension knotting in my chest. But about 15 minutes later, he moved. He came straight up to me. No hey, no smile. Just stood there, too close, and stared for a beat longer than felt normal. Then in a voice low and calm, he asked, "You ever think about how fragile a face is?" I blinked. No man. Can't say I have." He laughed, short, dry like sandpaper. "I have, a lot. You hit someone just right and you can watch the lights go out." He snapped his fingers sharp, like flipping a switch. "Nothing personal. Just power." My stomach twisted. I tried to smile, glanced at Zach. He was busy wrestling with some girl near the fire, oblivious. "Right. Well, hey, I'm just gonna... You know what's wild?" He cut me off. "I don't even know their names. Just walk up, say hey, and boom." He made a quick punching motion, sharp and sudden like muscle memory. One guy folded like a napkin. I couldn't tell if it was a joke. That was the worst part. His tone was steady, his body language relaxed, too calm for someone saying something that violent. "Helps when I'm C'd out," he added casually. "You know what I mean?" I shook my head. "Can't say I do." His lips pulled into a grin. "Crystal ice meth. Puts TV static in my skull. Gives me a fist like a freight train." "Oh," I said, my voice tighter than I meant. He tilted his head, studying me. "You're a quiet one." "I like that. Not all bark. You look like a good listener." I nodded, maybe too fast. "Just here to chill, man." "Same," he said, "chill. And maybe blow off a little steam." The firelight flickered across his face, shadows catching in the hollows under his eyes. For just a second, something slipped through. Not anger, not grief, just emptiness. "My girl left last week," he said suddenly. "Took my dog, my stereo. Said I was toxic. I told her I wasn't toxic. I was honest. People can't handle honesty anymore." He turned, locked his gaze on me. "You honest?" My throat went dry. Sure, yeah." "Then you'll tell me," he said. His tone sharpened, testing me. "You think I'm crazy?" Every instinct screamed that this was a trap. I'd seen videos of people trying to de-escalate situations like this at gas stations, outside bars. Half of them failed badly. I forced a small shrug. "I think you're going through it. Breakups are hard, man, but it gets better. It always does." I eased a step toward the crowd, toward noise, toward safety. He smiled then. Not warm, not friendly, just a curl of the mouth, a flicker in his eyes that made me colder than the night air. Not at me, at the thought. His eyes flicked sideways like he'd just remembered something. "You're my bro, right?" he said quietly. My mouth moved before my brain could stop it. "Yeah, man. Of course." He stuck out a massive hand, the knuckles still red. I shook it because I didn't know what else to do. His skin was hot, the grip iron tight, lingering a second too long. "To the fish in the sea," he said, lifting a pretend glass. "Sure, cheers," I muttered, trying to smile. I peeled away, back toward Zach, forcing my breathing to slow. The guy stayed at the edge of my vision the rest of the night. A dark pillar just outside the glow of the fire pit. I laughed at jokes, nodded through stories, but my stomach stayed in knots. But that wasn't the end. 2 nights later, I was leaving the gas station on 5th and Holloway when I saw him again. He stood across the street by the abandoned KFC, hands in his pockets, staring at the neon lights bleeding across the pavement. Same tank top, same expression, like the night at the tailgate had never ended. I pretended not to notice, kept my eyes forward, walked faster. The next day, a Facebook request popped up from a profile with no name. No picture of a person, just cracked pavement and the words, "To the fish in the sea." I blocked it immediately. A week later, I found a note tucked under my windshield at work. Handwritten, uneven letters. Quiet ones always know when to keep a secret. Bros keep each other safe. My stomach dropped. Zach laughed when I showed him. Probably just some dumb prank. My boss barely looked up. "You said it was a party, right? People mess around." But it didn't feel like a joke. Not anymore, especially not when I saw him again. This time at the local diner while I was eating lunch. He didn't come inside. He just stood across the street staring at me through the glass. Then my car got keyed. Deep gouges down the driver's side like a blade had dragged, slow and deliberate. No note, no witnesses, just silence. Then the tapping started. At my apartment window. 3 floors up. I live alone. One night I came home to find my front door unlocked. Nothing missing. Just open. Another night my power went out. Only mine. The hallway lights stayed on. The neighbors' TVs glowed through their curtains. I called the cops after that, filed a report, voice shaking as I spoke. They nodded, took notes, promised to keep an eye out. Without a name, a face, a concrete threat, it was just a weird story from a guy sounding paranoid. The last time I saw him was in a different parking lot altogether. The sun was going down, strip mall half empty. I pulled in for groceries and spotted him sitting on the curb outside a shuttered GameStop. When I stepped out of my car, he stood up. Didn't move toward me, just stood. His voice carried across the lot. Still got that punch in me. Wonder what it'd feel like if I missed this time. I didn't say a word. I got back into my car and drove off. I didn't even look in the rearview mirror. It's been months now. I moved apartments, changed jobs, stopped going to that Walmart, stopped going to most places. My social life died, and when people ask why, I tell them I'm focusing on myself. But the truth is, I still see him. Not every day, not up close. Sometimes it's a shape near a dumpster. Sometimes it's a parked car that looks empty until I blink and he's in the driver's seat watching. Sometimes I dream about him, about the way he talked, that raw emptiness in his voice. Sometimes I wonder if he's still out there watching someone else now, or if I'm just waiting for him to come back. Because the worst part isn't that he scared me. The worst part is that I believed him, about the punch, about the thrill, about the emptiness. I believed it, and I think some part of me is still waiting to see if he'll show me what it feels like. I wasn't even supposed to work that Sunday. Mother's Day 2015. I'd asked for the day off weeks earlier so I could take my mom to lunch. Nothing fancy. Just the little diner downtown where the booth smelled faintly of bacon grease and the waitresses knew her by name. She liked quiet, and that was my plan. An hour or two of peace, just me and her. But when the schedule came out Friday morning, my name was printed in bold right under customer service. 9 a.m. I knew why. 13 people had already called out by then. Mostly moms, and 5 more weren't even picking up their phones. I was 19, no kids, and I always showed up. That made me disposable, easy to plug in without warning. No explanation, no call, nothing. I was too tired to argue and too broke to risk a write-up. By 10:30 that morning, I was drowning. The line at the service desk stretched nearly halfway to the bakery, and I was the only one behind the counter. Customers barked about the wait, about the broken gift card scanner, about the heat. My radio buzzed nonstop. The air conditioning sputtered like it was on its last breath, barely pushing out a lukewarm trickle. Sweat gathered at the base of my neck, and every time I glanced at the clock, I found myself whispering a small prayer. Just get me to lunch. Just 5 minutes off my feet. Please. That's when she appeared. An older woman, blue hair curled into perfect stiff waves, her chest puffed out under a blindingly pink World's Best Nana shirt. She slapped her receipt onto the counter like it was evidence in a trial. This is ridiculous, she snapped, voice sharp enough to cut through the chatter. 30 minutes in line. On Mother's Day? What kind of store runs like this? I wanted to tell her I agreed, that I was just as miserable as she was. But instead I forced a polite nod and murmured, "I'm sorry for the wait." "Ma'am?" My earpiece crackled before I could say more. "Cass?" Rob's low voice cut in. He was one of the overnight security leads. Rarely used the radio unless something mattered. "You see the kid in the orange shoes? Over by the card aisle?" I turned my head, scanning the crowd. There, by the racks of overpriced greeting cards, stood a little boy, rocking back on his heels. Orange Velcro Nikes, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Something in the way his shoulders slumped and his eyes darted made my chest tighten. "Yeah, I see him," I whispered into the mic. "Is he lost?" "Don't stop him," Rob said quickly. He crapped himself. "It's everywhere." "I'm trying to find his mom on the cameras." The words made me freeze mid-sentence with the nana. I turned fully toward the boy, and that's when I noticed it. Dark stains down his shorts. His small legs streaked. A trail of smears across the tile leading back toward toys. The smell hit a moment later. Sour and unmistakable. The nana recoiled with a disgusted gasp. "Oh, for heaven's sake." I stepped out from behind the counter and crouched a little to soften my voice. "Hey buddy," I said gently. "You okay? Is your mom here?" His eyes were wide, rimmed red like he'd been crying, but there were no tears now. He looked dazed, humiliated, hollow. He didn't answer, but when I held out my hand, he took it without hesitation. His palm was clammy, too small against mine. "Let's get you cleaned up, all right?" I whispered, forcing calm into my tone. "You're okay. Don't worry." He stayed silent, letting me guide him toward the service desk. I tried not to breathe through my nose. About 10 minutes later, I had him settled on a chair in the returns corner, wrapped in a fluffy towel I'd grabbed from Home Goods. I handed him a water bottle, my voice soft with reassurances I wasn't sure he even heard. Nina, a young associate from my shift, ran to kids' apparel for wipes and a fresh outfit. Still, no sign of the mom. That's when Trevor, our head of security, walked past. "Trevor?" I called. Relief surged in my chest. "Did you find his mom?" But he didn't answer. He didn't even glance at me. He just kept walking slow and stiff toward the front doors. His eyes were glassy, his movements strange, like he was moving through a dream. A chill spread through me. Dylan, our camera guy, had come out from the back to sit with the boy. He caught my eye, his expression grim, his voice low. "Cass, don't go near the restrooms." I blinked. "What, why?" His jaw tightened. "Just don't," but I couldn't leave it alone. My feet carried me down the main aisle, past clearance bins stacked with discount toasters and pallets of half-crushed chip boxes. The further I walked, the thicker the air felt, heavy with something unspoken. When I turned the corner, I saw them, flashing red lights splashing against the linoleum outside the women's restroom. 2 paramedics crouched near the door, an officer scribbling notes on a pad and Trevor, pale and sweaty, leaning against the wall like he might slide down it. One of the cashiers had crept close, eyes wide, chewing on her lip. I edged over to her, voice low. "What happened? Did someone fall or—" Her throat bobbed like the words didn't want to come out. She OD'd. They found a needle in the stall." For a second, the world tilted. "No," I whispered. My voice cracked. "The boy's mom?" The cashier didn't speak, just gave me the smallest awful nod. I stumbled back, every sound around me muffled like cotton stuffed in my ears. I forced myself to walk back toward the service desk, though my legs felt shaky. The boy was sitting there in fresh clothes now, sipping water from a bendy straw Nina had dug up. Dylan crouched in front of him, trying gently to get a name, any word, but the kid just stared down at the cup in his hand, silent, lost. His face was blank, but it wasn't the blankness of calm. It was the emptiness of someone too small to process what had just been ripped away. How do you explain to a child that the person who brought him here had left him? Not on purpose, maybe, but in a way that couldn't be undone. The police stayed about an hour. We gave statements, answered questions, filled out paperwork under buzzing fluorescent lights. I stood back as the paramedics wheeled out a stretcher draped in a white sheet. Beneath it, I could see the outline of her frame, thin, too young. Maybe 30. Her hair was messy, matted. Even from where I stood, I could see the tracks on her arms. A cheap pink hoodie clung awkwardly to her body, zipper stuck halfway down. Someone whispered she'd tried to wedge the stall door shut with her purse, maybe hoping no one would find her until she'd floated back down. She never came back. By the time Child Protective Services arrived, the store had gone unnervingly quiet. The rush of customers, the angry complaints, even the chatter from the registers, it was like all of it had drained out, leaving only silence that pressed against the walls. We gave the boy a box of crayons and a coloring book from stationery. He hunched over the page, scratching out a crooked little truck. I crouched beside him, my voice low. "You're really brave, you know that?" The words felt clumsy, useless, but it was all I had. When the social worker came, she knelt too, her smile soft, practiced. She took his small hand in hers, and just like that, he was gone, led out of the store without a backward glance. I stayed at that counter for 4 more hours until my shift ended. I didn't cry until I got home. I didn't even take off my name tag before I slid down onto the apartment floor and broke apart. It wasn't just her death. It wasn't just the boy. It was everything. The way chaos gave way to silence, how quickly tragedy was folded into routine. The indifference of it all. No manager gave us a break. No one asked if we were okay. They muttered tragic, then turned to me with a return slip in hand. "Cass, void this. $7 socks." I stayed at Boxmoor another 11 months. I don't know why. Maybe guilt. Maybe the belief that something would change. But the truth was, every Sunday after that felt heavier. Whenever a child wandered too far into toys, my breath caught. Whenever I cleaned a spill in the bathroom, my hands shook. Whenever someone grumbled about a long line, I remembered the woman with blue curls and bit my tongue until it hurt. I never saw the boy again. No follow-up. No obituary for his mother in the local paper. Just a quiet, sealed-off tragedy, swallowed by the grind of retail. By the next morning, the greeting card aisle was fully restocked, bright and cheerful, as if nothing had ever happened. I was working the evening shift at Walmart the night it happened. April 2019. I'd been at that store just under 6 months. I was 24, caught between finishing college and figuring out what the hell I wanted out of my life. Stuck doing part-time shifts at the Walmart in Willow Creek, a mid-sized town in Georgia with nothing much to do, and nowhere worth going after 9 at night. I worked the GM side, general merchandise. That night I was handling returns in aisle 18, which runs parallel to condiments. It was one of those dead-end shifts where time drags like syrup, and all you can think about is your next break. The store wasn't busy, just a few stragglers grabbing cat litter, frozen dinners, or 6-packs on their way home. The overhead speakers buzzed with overplayed pop songs turned up way too loud, and the lights above me flickered faintly like they always did, as if the whole place was tired. I was stacking misplaced candles back on the end cap when I noticed someone across the divider in sauces. At first it didn't even register, just another customer. A woman, maybe mid-40s, but then it clicked. Her hoodie was drenched, clinging to her frame, and her feet were bare. Bare. Feet. I glanced again. Yep, no shoes. Just black, cracked soles, swollen ankles pressed against the filthy tile. She stood right in front of the hot sauce wall, staring up at the top shelf where we kept the extreme stuff. Ghost Blaze, Widow's Flame, bottles with warning labels no one actually reads. I told myself not to care. Barefoot people came in all the time, usually homeless, sometimes high. But the way she moved, it tied my stomach into knots. She held one of the bottles like it was precious, turning it slowly in her hand. Her lips were moving. No earbuds, no phone. Just her whispering to glass. I edged closer. Not out of nosiness, instinct. You work retail long enough, you know when something's off. And she wasn't just off, she was unraveling right in front of me. Her whole body trembled. Her hoodie wasn't just wet from rain. Sweat was bleeding through the fabric. Ma'am? I asked, voice low. You okay? She lifted her head. Her eyes were bloodshot. Not tired, not just red, but raw, like she'd been crying for days. Her cheeks glistened. Her whole face looked soaked, streaked with tears and something else like she'd been dunked under water. She didn't answer. Just locked eyes with me. And then, without warning, she cracked the bottle open. Wait, hey, stop. Before I could move, she tilted it back and started drinking. Straight Ghost Blaze. Thick red liquid poured down her chin, streaking her shirt. She gulped it like it was nothing, hacking between swallows, gasping for air but still forcing more down. Her hands shook so badly I thought the bottle would shatter in her grip. "Jesus Christ, ma'am. No, stop, you can't." She coughed, choked, then dropped into a squat as the empty bottle clattered to the tile. Her arms wrapped around her stomach, her groan echoing through the aisle, loud, guttural, almost like labor. I froze for half a beat, then grabbed my walkie. "This is Cassie in grocery. I need assistance in aisle 19. Customer in distress, medical." She just drank an entire bottle of Ghost Blaze. She's shaking, she's not okay. A pause. Then Dawn's voice crackled back, calm but urgent. "Copy, on my way." I looked down at her again. She was gasping, eyes wild, lips blanching. Her hands quivered violently against her hoodie. Then she rasped something that stuck in my head like a splinter. "It won't burn if you deserve it." I blinked. "What?" She repeated it, her voice lower this time, almost reverent. "It won't burn if you deserve it." Her stomach convulsed, and before I could process it, she vomited across the tile, red and thick, threaded with yellow foam. The smell hit instantly. Vinegar, stomach acid, something sharp and metallic. I staggered back, one hand clamped over my nose. That's when Dawn came running, Myra right behind her. They took one look at her and called 911. By then she was crying, not loud but soft, like a kid who'd worn herself out. Her hands clutched her stomach, rocking back and forth, face damp with tears and sweat. She kept sobbing as she mumbled that same phrase under her breath. "It won't burn if you deserve it." When the paramedics arrived, they moved fast, lifting her onto the gurney while she repeated the words over and over like a prayer. I stood frozen, useless. Dawn tried to calm the few customers who had stopped to stare, and Myra got down on her knees to handle the cleanup, gloves on, her face pinched against the smell. I walked away, slipped into the break room and sat with my head between my knees for 20 minutes, trying to quiet the shaking in my chest. The weirdest part? She came back 2 weeks later, Thursday night again, same shift, same aisle. I was restocking chips when I saw her out of the corner of my eye. This time she looked different, flip-flops on her feet, clean jeans, a fresh hoodie, healthier. But I knew it was her, Elaine. She walked right to the same shelf, stood in front of the hot sauces and just stared. For nearly half an hour she didn't touch a thing, didn't say a word. Then she left. I told Dawn. He just sighed and said, "Keep an eye on her, but don't approach unless she does something dangerous." She came back 4 more times. Always Thursday. Always around 7:30 p.m., never bought anything. Never spoke. Just stood there, gazing at the bottles like they were altars. We started calling her Blaze Lady. The younger cashiers made jokes. Maybe she was filming for TikTok, or doing some kind of bizarre spiritual cleanse. Some thought it was a prank. I didn't laugh. I couldn't, because in her eyes I saw something I recognized. Pain. Her story surfaced months later. One of the older ladies in apparel, Gina, heard it through her cousin who worked at the hospital. Her name was Elaine Moss. She'd lost her 13-year-old son in a fire the year before. A kitchen fire? He'd been trying to make wings, oil stove, a bottle of hot sauce nearby. Flames spread fast. He got trapped behind a door. Elaine was outside in the yard when it started. She couldn't reach him. Couldn't save him. He burned alive. She spent 3 days in the psych ward after the night at our store. They said she'd tried hurting herself before. Starvation, cutting. But the hot sauce was something new. A different way to punish herself. The last time I saw her, it was different. She came in just before close. I was sweeping near the registers when she walked straight toward me. She wasn't trembling, not crying. Calm. She held a bottle of Widow's Flame in her hand, unopened, still sealed. She extended it to me. "You can put this back," she said quietly. "I don't need it anymore." I nodded, unable to speak. She gave me a small smile, the saddest smile I'd ever seen. "Tell them I'm okay now. I won't come back again." Then she turned, walked out into the night, and she never returned. Some nights I still think about her. About the ways grief warps people, how deep it digs, how it spills into the world in ways that don't make sense to anyone else. I don't work at Walmart anymore. I finished my pharmacy tech program, moved on. But I never forgot Elaine Moss. Never forgot what grief looked like barefoot on tile. And I never forgot what she told me before she left. It doesn't burn anymore. I never pictured myself working retail. Honestly, I used to look down on it. But life doesn't care about what you pictured. Rent shows up like clockwork, groceries don't buy themselves, and pride doesn't fill an empty fridge. After dropping out of community college and cycling through babysitting jobs that never paid enough, I ended up behind a register at Martin's Supercenter. It's one of those 24-hour big box stores planted in the middle of River's Edge, a town with more deer than people, and a bus system that exists just enough to keep you dependent. At first, I thought I'd despise it. I didn't. The job was numbing in a way that almost felt like relief. Scan bag, smile, repeat. The rhythm made the hours bleed together, and most customers blurred into background noise. Except some didn't. Some made themselves unforgettable. It started on a dead Tuesday morning. I was on register 3, half-heartedly wiping down the belt between customers. My legs ached from standing since dawn, and I was debating whether I hated myself enough to try the gas station sushi on break. That's when I saw him. He was big, easily over 6 feet, broad-shouldered, solid in a way that filled space. His flannel shirt looked stained, though not filthy, his heavy boots thudding against the tile with each step. He didn't look homeless, but he didn't look clean either. His hair was greasy, slicked back but failing, pieces falling limp across his forehead. His eyes, they were the kind of eyes that told you he hadn't slept in days, sunken, hollow. He came up to my register with empty hands. I put on the practiced voice. Hi there. Can I help you find something? Nothing. He just stood there, arms hanging stiff at his sides. His stare didn't land on me exactly. It slid past me like I was a shape on the wall. 10 seconds stretched, maybe 12, before he suddenly turned on his heel and walked out of the store without a word. I blinked at the automatic doors closing behind him. Didn't even get the chance to ask what that was about. Later, I mentioned it to Derek, the floor supervisor. He smirked. Sounds like your biggest fan. I laughed because that's what you do, but my stomach had already tightened into a knot I couldn't shake. 2 hours later, I got stuck with bathroom duty. I always hated the men's room. It's never just gross, it's a whole new level of gross. Still, I hauled the mop bucket in and got to work. I was wringing out the mop by the door when it pushed open. Him. Same flannel. Same boots. Same hollow-eyed stare. He stepped inside, scanning the room like he was checking corners. His gaze locked onto me and something in me went rigid. I straightened quickly, gripping the mop handle. "Oh, sorry," I said, forcing my voice into casual. "I'll be out of your way in just a second." No answer. I pulled the mop toward me and moved for the door, but he mirrored me. Stepped right into the frame. Just stood there, blocking the exit. 10 seconds. Maybe more. My pulse slammed in my ears and I tightened my grip on the mop, ready to swing if I had to. Then without a word, he shifted sideways, opening the way. I didn't thank him. Didn't say a thing. Just walked out fast, forcing myself not to break into a run. He stayed in there for 30 minutes. Long enough that Derek eventually had to knock on the door and tell him to wrap it up. When he finally came out, he walked straight out of the store again. Same as before. No purchases. No words. I tried to talk myself down. Maybe he was mentally ill. Maybe he was socially awkward. Maybe I was projecting my nerves onto someone harmless. Maybe the problem was me. But then he came back. An hour later, I spotted him pacing near the customer service desk, slow back and forth strides like a caged animal. This time he grabbed random items, socks, a flashlight, a couple cans of soup, and went to a different register. He didn't say a single word. Just handed over exact cash, stood there while the cashier bagged everything, then left, items still sitting on the counter. He didn't even look back. I told the manager we should pull the footage just in case. He barely glanced up from his clipboard. Unless he steals something or makes a threat, there's nothing to report. Just let security know if he comes back. That was it. That was the line between safe and not safe. I nodded, but inside I knew I'd already crossed it. Security at Martin's was basically one tired guy named Tony, sitting in a cramped booth with a bank of flickering camera screens and a half-empty coffee cup. He spent more time swiping at Candy Crush than watching the feeds. Knowing he was the only line of defense didn't make me feel safer. It made me feel alone. I told myself it was over, that he was gone. I tried to believe it. 2 weeks passed. I mostly forgot about him, at least I convinced myself I had. I was on a late shift one Thursday, 2 p.m. to 11 p.m., the kind of shift that leaves your feet aching and your brain soft. The walk home was just 4 blocks, quiet at that hour. I liked it. The cool air, the dark houses, the sense that the world had gone to sleep and I was sneaking through it. I always stopped at the Route 19 bus stop on the corner. I didn't ride the bus, but it was my landmark. My roommate would sometimes pick me up there. That night I left work with my hoodie zipped up to my chin, earbuds in but no music playing. The street lamp above the bench flickered, buzzing faintly. I felt him before I saw him. That weight. That instinct that someone's eyes are on you. I turned my head. He was already there, standing right next to me like he'd been waiting all along. I froze mid-step. My throat closed. He didn't say a word, didn't look at me, just stood perfectly still facing the road, hands at his sides. No bus came. The seconds stretched like taffy. My hands trembled inside my pockets. I wrapped my fingers around my phone like a lifeline, my thumb hovering over the screen. 10 minutes crawled past. Just breathing, just standing. Then the bus arrived, brakes screaming. I stepped forward without thinking. He didn't move. I got on. He stayed behind. The doors hissed shut and I watched through the smudged window as the bus lurched away. He turned and began walking down the sidewalk, slow and deliberate, like nothing about this was strange. I didn't go home. I stayed on the bus until it looped back to the depot, sat in the dim overhead light with my heart pounding, staring at my reflection in the dark glass. For 3 weeks, I avoided late shifts, traded with coworkers, made excuses. I told myself I was being cautious, not scared. But I didn't see him again, not until I did. It was a bright Friday morning, sun glinting off car hoods. I'd slept in, done laundry, was walking home with my headphones pulled down around my neck, one earbud in. The smell of detergent still clung to my clothes. Then a cluster of sirens erupted from up the street. I turned my head. 6 police cruisers shot past, lights strobing red and blue. They swerved to a stop near the corner. I heard cops yelling, "Hands behind your back! Get down now!" Someone had a taser drawn, and there he was, face down on the pavement, cuffed, struggling. His flannel was ripped open, his hands bleeding, his boots scraping at the asphalt as he tried to twist away. They hauled him up and shoved him into the back of a cruiser. As the car rolled past me, his eyes met mine through the window. No anger, no surprise, just that same flat, unreadable nothingness. It should have ended there. It didn't. A few weeks later, a detective came into the store, a badge clipped to his belt, asking questions. Turned out the man had no ID on him when they arrested him. No address. No known family. 3 burner phones in his backpack, all wiped clean. They said he sometimes slept behind the old church downtown. Other nights in the cemetery. There were reports of him casing houses, knocking on doors at 3 a.m., and just staring when people answered. They found a notebook. My name was in it. My schedule. I quit Martin's after that. Packed my things. Left River's Edge. I never found out what he wanted. Never heard his voice. But I learned something about the quiet ones. The ones who stand too still. The ones who don't speak. The ones who only need 10 seconds.